Welcome back to the Rebellion, guys. We are offsite with our mobile setup. If you saw our Facebook page or Instagram, you'll see the before and after. We're pretty proud of it, and we're pretty excited. Shane, you excited about being here
buddy.
at the Georgia Libertarian Party State Convention for
I'm actually
2020?
really, really excited. There is a bunch going on here today. We just had Catherine Bernard speak this morning. It was actually really good, and kudos to you, Catherine, for coming down as a quote-unquote Republican. We're going to bring you to the dark side eventually. Full blast here. But yeah, I think she had an outstanding speech. I'm excited. You're on a panel today with Josh Smith and with Pete.
Yeah. Pete, who we hope to have on the show.
Yeah, it's we got Pete here. Adam Kokesh is here. Vermin Supreme is here. I'm pretty sure Jacob Hornberger is coming after talking to Michael Heiss.
Really?
Yeah,
Cool.
And so we're going to try to snag as many of these guys in here for quick little sit-downs, their hopes, their aspirations, anything they want to talk about, and I hope this is a fantastic episode. 156 after the blank show, the poop show.
I should have called it the blank show. That would have been cooler.
The 155, the fully edited show. Man, it was nuts, man.
Thank you for doing that.
Oh yeah,
I think it's better for the future.
You're very welcome. It was a fun yet painstaking process. I had to take all the passion out of everything everything that we said, but I think it came out good, and I hope you guys can probably get on YouTube, and it's Rebellion Pod on YouTube. You can watch it there. You probably figure out what we said in most of those things. So, but yeah, we're gonna cut here, and we'll be back with our first guest.
Peace. And we're back on the Rebellion. We've got Jacob Hornberger, who is also running for the LP. I've got my buddy Shane across from me. And Jacob, thanks for coming in.
Oh, it's an honor and pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
So you seem like you're very busy. Unfortunately, you missed the presidential debate we had last night, but you were here late in the night hanging out with us at the meet and greet. You were up early this morning. You gave a speech, and from what I understand, you're flying out in just a few hours again.
Yeah, I was really sorry that I missed the convention and the debate yesterday, but as you may know, I'm waging a very active campaign in North Carolina as part of the Super Tuesday primary. The LPs earned the right to be in that primary.
Nice.
So I'm going out trying to get people to boycott the Democrat and Republican primary and come and vote for me. So I'm using the primary system as a way to advance liberty, the Libertarian Party. So I had an opportunity to be in the Martin Luther King parade in Fayetteville, North Carolina yesterday, and I just couldn't pass it up. And it was just a wonderful experience. They had me behind an ROTC unit, marching ROTC unit, which is kind of ironic. But they would stop to do their little performances, and I was driving my 4Runner with my sign, Jacob Hornberger for President, Libertarian, March 3rd primary. And I thought, I don't want to sit here in my vehicle. So I opened the door and just started getting out and walking over the curb, and everybody was African American, and here's this white guy getting out of his car, headed toward the curb, and it's like they had this stunned look on their face. And I would walk up and say, smiling, I'm Jacob Hornberger running for president, Libertarian, and they'd all start smiling, and they were just so nice and friendly, and I had a blast.
What kind of questions about your policies did you get from them?
Well, it was just a parade, so there's no questions. I mean, it was just like I'd shake hands with people on the left side of the street, and then I'd cross the street, and my car door would be open, and the ROTC unit would start traveling on. I said, I got to run now and get back in my car, and this happened several times during the parade. But my big signature issue down there is the drug war, and that's what's touching chords. And I'm passing out a campaign card that says it's the most racially bigoted government program since segregation. It's Jim Crow mass incarceration, and that's touching some chords. I mean, they know it. And so I just got a article written about my campaign by an African-American paper in Raleigh, where the reporter says he says I'm an ardent leftist. I'm to the left of Barack Obama. I'm considering voting for Jacob Hornberger.
Yeah.
And because of this rotten criminal justice system we have, I mean, they know it. African Americans know we've got a rotten criminal justice system, in large part because of the drug war. And he's exhorting his readers to do the same. And so we're making some headway.
It's like our buddy Scott Horton says. We're way better on the social issues than the Democrats, and we're way better on the economic issues than the Republicans. And to kind of meet them on their own ground and beat them in those places where they dominate is a heck of a thing. You become the darling of the LPMC, and the energy behind yourself and Josh Smith and what Michael Heiss is doing and bringing in people like Tom Woods and Dave Smith and even myself. I have not seen this kind of energy since the revolution, and I'm ecstatic what you're doing. You're communicating a message very clearly with a lot of passion out there. And I guess my question is how do you feel? How are you feeling right now about the run? I mean, is there just this so much support that you just don't know where to go and what to do and how to touch everybody at the same time, or what's the feeling you're getting being out there?
Well, no, I really feel like I'm having to fight for this nomination. We got a slate of outstanding candidates in this party, and they've been running for about a year or 2 years, and I got a long way to go here to try to reach the top. But I'm just asking people, give me a chance to earn your confidence, and I invite people to come and look at my blog on jacobforliberty.com and look what I'm doing in North Carolina, because that's the kind of campaign I would wage. But I'm with you. I mean, the energy in this party I can feel it.
Yeah.
I mean, when I'm speaking at these state conventions, okay, in North Carolina, I'm talking to non-choir members. But when I come into the conventions, I'm preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
And I love preaching to the choir.
you claps and whistles and amens and everything else.
Yeah, because when people break up your talk with an applause, it's like, boy, you can feel the energy. They're charging your batteries at the same time.
Absolutely. I know you are one of those guys, and I don't call myself a constitutional expert by any means, but the study of it and the understanding of it and using it as a tool to even bring back, and I'm not saying the Constitution is perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but in terms of using it as a tool to wrangle in the government, what are your perspectives on that?
Yeah, I mean, I use the Constitution as a guide,
right.
And I think the framework of it was really sound. The idea of it, of bringing a government into existence with very limited powers, we know that it certainly wasn't a perfect system. I mean, you got slavery. How much more imperfect than you get than that? But in terms of the overall context of bringing a government into existence that has very limited few powers, and then the American people make sure that it even gets better with the Bill of Rights, which aren't really a Bill of Rights, or a Bill of Prohibitions, because our ancestors understood that people's rights come from God and from nature.
Right.
So the Bill of Rights prohibits the government from taking away rights. And then you've got the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th Amendments that protect people who are being targeted by the government. Well, the problem is that all of those have been eviscerated by the national security state.
Yeah.
The CIA, the Pentagon, the NSA.
The whole alphabet soup. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what we need to recapture in this country. We need to go back to the sound founding principles, not the bad ones. We know they were bad ones, but the sound ones, and start thinking about restoring those sound principles on which our nation was founded. And that's what Democrats and Republicans have destroyed.
Quick question, if you don't mind, just either or. Who do you side with, Federalist or Anti-Federalist?
Probably the Anti-Federalists.
I
mean, their arguments are very persuasive.
Oh, they're prophetic, aren't they?
They're awesome.
They're amazing.
Yeah, they really are.
So you kind of said that there's a bunch of candidates. A lot have been running for much longer than you. For those who don't know, who might think you've come out of nowhere, what have you been doing your whole life? I know you have an organization that's existed for, is it almost 3 decades? The Freedom for
Future of Freedom Foundation.
Thank you. And you were in the Army before that.
Yeah, I grew up on the border, Texas-Mexican border, on a farm on the Rio Grande. We hired illegal immigrants, and they were the hardest working people I've ever seen. And that was one of the reasons. I was a Democrat, a liberal Democrat. I campaigned when I was in the 5th grade for John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson.
Wow.
I met Johnson at the LBJ Ranch at a political rally my dad took me to. And he asked me what I was doing to help them out, and I said, well, I'm stuffing envelopes for you, And so then I got back to Laredo to practice law. I was still a liberal Democrat, but it was the immigration issue that made me start questioning things, because Democrats say they love the poor, needy, and disadvantaged, and I was walking around a detention center one time because I had asked the federal judge there to appoint me to represent illegal immigrants for free. And I saw these guys walking around, and I said, how can Democrats profess to love the poor, needy, and disadvantaged when they're doing to these people? And all they want to do is work, and they're sitting here in jail. And then I discovered libertarianism, which just changed the course of my life completely. I mean, I started studying libertarianism instead of my trial books. And I got a job working at the foundation, the Foundation for Economic Education in New York, and I gave up the law practice, stayed there for 2 years, and then started the Future of Freedom Foundation with the aim of presenting a very principled, uncompromising case for liberty. And that's what I've been doing for 30 years, and I love it. I mean, I'm just one of those lucky people in life that gets to go to work and just loves what I do every day. I just love it. But I finally said, I'm at a point in my life where I want to take these people on directly, Democrats and Republicans, and that means the political process. And that's why I'm seeking this party's nomination, is that I want to take these people on, Trump and whoever the Democrats appoint, to say, look what you've done to this country. You are leading this country in a very bad direction. Both of you are. And I want to move this country in the direction of liberty, peace, prosperity, and harmony with the people of the world.
Awesome. So to stay on the immigration issue, during your speech, you used the term open borders. And what would you say to libertarians who acknowledge that if you have a piece of property and you want people to come, you should have that right, but also because of the size of the government we have, so the welfare state and the drug war, there's also an effective violation that happens when people come in and take advantage of those big government programs.
Yeah, I mean, that situation exists regardless. I mean, it exists here domestically. People can go from Alabama to California to get generous welfare benefits, but we don't want to put immigration controls and travel restrictions around California because we believe that freedom of travel is a fundamental right. Well, the same thing applies internationally. Freedom of movement and freedom of travel are fundamental, natural, God-given rights. The pursuit of happiness, we say that in the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson points that out. When you cross a border, you're not violating anyone's rights. Now, if you trespass onto somebody's private property, you are. But just the mere fact that I crossed the border from North Carolina to Virginia, there's no rights being violated. All right, so most immigrants come here to get rich. I'd say 99% of them do. They come here to get a job, make some money, go back,
or stay.
But the ones that come to get on welfare are a very small minority. I mean, I to be honest with you, I've never met an immigrant that says I came here to get on welfare, and there's actually a 3-year delay. Well, what we need to do as libertarians is stick with our principles. Even if it were to mean increased taxes, and that's essentially the argument, that they come on welfare and taxes are going to go up.
Kind of.
Okay, so taxes go up. Does that mean that we should abandon our principles and join up with Republicans and Democrats and support their statist programs because it's going to cost us more money? I say no. We adhere to principle, and we try to get the wrongdoing, the welfare state, dismantled. An analogy is the drug war. I mean, that's, to me, is a litmus test as to whether you're a libertarian or not, whether you support the drug war or not. If drugs were legalized, which is what we favor, no doubt some addicts would be using Medicaid to go get help, treatment. Well, should we start supporting the drug war until Medicaid is abolished? That would be horrible.
Yeah.
That's a great comparison.
We have to stick with our principles and then keep arguing why it's wrong to be using the taxing process to take money from people to whom it belongs and give it to anybody, whether it's American or immigrants.
So one more devil's advocate then. What would you say to the argument that cheap labor is making Americans poorer?
Oh, absolutely. It's the contrary. When you have division of labor, you have actually increased standards of living. This is one of the reasons why 19th century America was skyrocketing in terms of standards of living, especially in the latter part of the 1800s, early 1900s. You had a system of open immigration here where, you had a cursory inspection for tuberculosis at Ellis Island. But the Southwest, the borders were open all the way to the 1930s. On the West Coast, they were totally open. So you had these countless immigrants flooding in, most of whom, or many of whom, couldn't speak English. They were contributing to an increased standard of living. Now, why is that? All right, well, at the bottom echelons of an economy, your immigrants are generally going to displace those workers, like farm workers, people that are out there doing the back-breaking work of harvesting crops. Those people definitely will be displaced. But the immigrants also bring in a demand for goods and services. They're out buying used automobiles. They're buying used clothing. They're buying this. They're buying that. all of a sudden the demand for labor in those services goes up.
Yep.
You know, the used car dealers need salesmen now. They need clerks, secretaries. That's where the displaced workers end up working because they're better qualified for that, better paying jobs. So the displacement is difficult temporarily, but they end up with better paying jobs in the long run.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. I was mostly thinking of the fact that also the cost of goods is going to go down, and cost of goods is what people live on. So the food that's being picked by the lower paid workers, and if the cost of living is less, then that's better for everybody.
Absolutely. What you're talking about is efficiencies in production,
Yeah.
Lower costs, and then increased production as well. More consumer goods make it better for consumers because the price is going down. So you look at any society that's had this. Argentina had open borders. They copied our system in their late 1800s. Fascinating story. And they emulated what we had done with the Constitution, the Declaration. So they established a society. This is before Perón, where and this is a history that many Americans don't know. They had low taxes, low regulations, open immigration, and their standard of living skyrocketed. And people were coming from Europe flooding in. I mean, you still have a German population there and an Italian population. Buenos Aires was the largest city on the eastern seaboard, second only to New York City.
Wow.
Perón comes in and establishes the same type of welfare system that Roosevelt established in the 1930s. That was the beginning of the end for Argentina.
Makes perfect sense. Kind of on the same vein of talking about where people want to cross borders and the right to travel and everything. Let's talk about tariffs real quick and the ability of man to trade with each other through consent. Can you give us your thoughts and ideas on the current climate and what you'd like to see?
Yeah, this trade war that Trump has initiated against China is the most destructive thing that could ever happen. Well, at least one of the most destructive things. His foreign policies are obviously much more destructive. Yeah. But, I mean, he's initiated on his own. It's incredible that a president has the authority to raise taxes on the American people without specific congressional approval.
Full stop for a second. For people who are new, because obviously we get new listeners all the time that are coming over from both the left and the right who are maybe recovering neocons. Can you unpack that statement just a little bit for them?
On the tariffs?
Yes.
And why tariffs are taxes.
Yes.
Yeah. A tariff is just a name. It's a different word for a sales tax.
Yeah.
It's a sales tax on goods that you buy overseas. It's no different from going into a store here and buying something and they say, well, you owe 10% sales tax. So this is a sales tax on goods that you buy over there. So Trump apparently had it in his mind that when he raised tariffs unilaterally without congressional approval, that he was making the Chinese pay this tax.
Yeah.
But so I think somebody finally explained to him, no, you're raising taxes on the American people. So he ends up bankrupting all these farmers. I mean, it was just incredible. I mean, these were farmers who were selling soybeans and other things into China, and he's going to be the big hero. And that raises the real question is, what does the president of the United States have to do with trade at all? Mm-hmm. I mean, nobody elected him to be the agent for American corporations or American farmers. But yet he takes this role that, man, he's the big negotiator, big deal maker. He bankrupts these farmers. He takes the money that he's raising with these taxes and sends them a welfare check. Yeah. I mean, it's just incredible, the double whammy that he does here. Okay, the point you're making is that in every trade, both sides benefit. Mm-hmm. It's an axiom because when you trade with someone, you're giving up something you value less for something you value more. Yeah. So both sides benefit from trade. And so you can raise your standard of living just by trading. Mm-hmm. You don't even have to have any industries or factories and stuff. The fact that you have the widest ambit of trading, standards of living are rising. So to the extent that any government restriction interferes with that process, a tariff, a tax, or an import restriction, you're automatically lowering people's standard of living. But what you're doing most of all, you're destroying their freedom. Yeah. Because at the bottom of it is you have a right to trade with whomever you want to trade. That is an essential aspect of liberty. And that's what we need to remind people in this country, that these trade wars not only are destructive economically, they destroy our freedom.
Yeah, we had a whole show about the unintended consequences, the lost opportunity costs, and your right to to associate with whoever you want to associate with through trade or services or whatever it was. And so I think you make some outstanding points. You nailed it in your speech in there with bringing everybody home. As a Marine, man, I can't tell you, between you and the other guys up there, I would rather have any of you. Please, God, give us one of these wonderful men or women that can articulate
Just sane people.
the idea of, hey, we're overextended. We are in, I don't know, 130 plus countries. We've got a couple thousand bases around the world. We're an empire. We were supposed to be the smallest government that was ever created, and we've grown into this empire, and we need to bring all that back and scale down. The costs around the world blow back in terms of especially the kinetic force, the regulations and the sanctions even, especially in the Middle East. Can you speak to that for just a small moment?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can do a better job than you just did.
I'm passionate about it, man.
Oh, absolutely. And I myself have a military background, so I appreciate what you're saying, is because soldiers are being used as pawns in all this. I mean, it's not surprising to me that so many veterans have a high suicide rate, because they've just been used as pawns in a very destructive process. And it's a process that is destroying our liberty here at home. I would bring the troops home from everywhere, not just the Middle East and Afghanistan, Korea, Africa, Latin America, Europe. World War II's over.
Yeah.
Bring them all home and discharge them. You don't need them. I mean, if you stop this paradigm of foreign interventionism, now you don't need all these troops anymore. Mm-hmm. And it is an empire. It's an empire of military bases, alliances with dictatorial regimes. This is not what America was all about. America was about what John Quincy Adams said in his 4th of July, 1821 speech to Congress, called In Search of Monsters to Destroy. He said, the United States, we know that there's tyrants overseas, there's civil wars, there's revolutions, there's famines, but the United States was not going to be the nation that sends troops abroad to save you. But the flip side of that is, if you can get out, we will open our borders to you. Mm-hmm. We won't forcibly repatriate you to the country you came from. That's the way we will help you out. So you're absolutely right. The solution to this is to go back to the founding principle of non-interventionism on which our government was founded, lift all sanctions and embargoes against every country. I mean, sanctions and embargoes are really doing what terrorism does. They target the innocent populace of a country with death. Yeah. I mean, the sanctions against Iraq in the 1990s killed hundreds of thousands of Iraqi children. Yeah. And Madeleine Albright, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, goes on 60 Minutes and says, they ask her, are the deaths of 500,000 Iraqi children worth it? She goes, well, it's a tough issue, but yeah, they're worth it. And she was talking about regime change, which is a central aspect of the national security state. So you bring all the troops home, you stop the foreign intervention. Oh,
you're an isolationist, Jacob Hornberger. What do you say to that?
Exactly. But if you look at what we stand for, opening the borders, unleashing the private sector to interact with the people of the world, which is what Trump and the Democrats don't want to do. They got it reversed. They want to unleash the federal government to stomp on people around the world and isolate the private sector with Berlin walls and tariffs and so forth. We want to do the opposite. We want to unleash the private sector, because the world loves Americans. Yeah. They love tourism. They love our money. They love culture groups. They love businessmen. They just don't like the federal government, and with some justification.
Yeah, when you show up in a helmet and body armor and MRAPs and point guns at people and tell them what they can and cannot do, I imagine it'd probably have about the same effect here, but not for as long.
And they send these warships. It's so bizarre. They send these warships as diplomats, where we're going to have a ship go over there with all our guns to show a friendship mission.
What was it, Anti-Federalist 3 or 4, where it was the hobgoblins and the bugbears is what they used to call them. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and I need to point out that all this foreign interventionism is the reason we have the TSA, Homeland Security, because they generate the anger and hatred that produces the anti-American terrorism, which they then use to take away our liberties with these intrusive searches at the airports and Homeland Security. I grew up in an era where none of this existed.
Yeah, same here. I mean, when you walked into the airport, everybody went to the gate together, right? I mean, you just walked out there, you gave them your ticket, and you got on the plane.
Right, and we can restore that.
Yeah.
If we end this foreign policy of foreign interventionism.
I absolutely
and
agree
empire,
with you.
as you point out.
Yeah.
So it's funny because every time I'm listening to you talk, like I've got these devil advocate ideas here, and then you address it 5 seconds later. I'm very curious about how you got to where you are. You seem to have all the issues down 100%. What is the last issue where you changed your mind ideologically to some consequence? And how long ago was it?
Yeah. we're going to go back in the Wayback Machine here, aren't we?
Question.
Back in my day, Sonny.
Well, the man who had the biggest influence on me was Leonard Read, the founder of the Foundation for Economic Education. I mean, his books were just so profound for me. And then Ludwig von Mises had a tremendous impact on me, and much more so than Hayek, who has been a big influence for me, and Milton Friedman and so forth. But everything was falling into place. I mean, it's like everybody else that discovers libertarianism. You hit a roadblock and you say, wait a minute, abolish public schools? I mean, are you serious? And then you start thinking it through and you study and you read it and you say, yeah, okay, yeah, separate school and state the way our ancestors separated church and state. But I think the last one, I couldn't get the the helmet laws and the seatbelt laws. I said, how do you resolve this? How do you resolve this? And so I went up to a conference that the Foundation for Economic Education was putting on. This was in the late 70s. So the director of seminars, I said, what do you do with seatbelt laws and helmet laws? He goes, well, on my highway, I would require people to wear seatbelts. And it just, all the light bulbs went off. It's like, okay, privatize the friggin' highways, and then everything falls out. The owner decides it, and the customers decide it. And I was like, so I was so relieved, because I think that's probably the last one.
It is really a relief when you realize that you're supporting a state solution which requires force, and you finally have the light given to you of, here's how we can do it privately.
Exactly.
This burden of I'm supporting force and aggression kind of comes off of you. There are two issues I'd love to get your take on it. They're kind of new issues that weren't talked about as much, or there's less libertarian talking points on them. But you have that the robots are going to take all over the jobs, and one of the solutions being the universal basic income. And I assume it's going to be some kind of response the same about the low wages kind of thing. But what would your response be to the robot's going to take all the jobs, and we're just going to be poor and not going to be able to do anything?
Well, that's an interesting question, because that argument was being made in the 1800s during the Industrial Revolution, that all these machines
we're still not there.
Right. I mean, it's a variation of it, that the machines were putting people out of business. And one of the great writers that has had a strong, powerful impact on me, along with a lot of other libertarians, was Frédéric Bastiat, a French free market libertarian legislator, his books are just brilliant. And he addresses one of those, that it's again just the division of labor. I mean, you take, for example, like at the airports where they let you use credit cards now, which put all the cash register people out of business, like they're out of jobs.
Do you not care about them, Jacob?
Right. Do you hate the poor? Or, well, we get that all the time. Well, okay, that robot industry now needs people in there. I mean, people are buying robots. And so all of a sudden there's jobs that are being demanded, their employment. Hey, we need people over here servicing the robots, producing the robots, selling the robots.
Fixing them when they break down. Or now if you got self-scanners, you got to have somebody who starts to understand how to make those things work, and they blip all the time.
Exactly. So it's what Joseph Schumpeter called creative destructionism.
Yes.
That's the free market process. So like when you have automobiles, you're putting the invention of the automobiles is threatening the buggy whip industry. I mean, it's like, wow, these guys are going to be put out of jobs. Maybe we shouldn't allow these automobiles to be produced.
I taught this very thing exactly, almost verbatim to my 8-year-old the other day. And he's like, oh, yeah, no, that's great. I like that idea. What, horse and buggy, cars, that's the way to go. And you tell them about the advancement in cars even, right? Like, hey, Henry Ford would have gone out of business if you didn't keep innovating. Like, it's just the same thing. Oh, these guys got air conditioning over here and theirs. I'm going over there, man.
Exactly. And that air conditioning industry is employing people.
Yeah.
So people are having to shift. I mean, it's change. But as soon as you try to stop change, that's when everything starts to devolve. And that's when you start getting the impoverished society. And that's that old dichotomy between security and liberty. That change is difficult, Jacob. It's I might lose my job. Yeah, but the dynamism of a free market economy is just, to me, so exciting.
Yeah. Save the milkman, right?
I mean, you look at the society in which we live today. I mean, there's massive suicide rates, massive alcoholism, drug addiction. I think a large part of this is the government tightening the screws on society, people in society, and people not realizing that it's the denial of freedom.
I would love to get your take if you got a couple more minutes. I'm a giant John Taylor Gatto fan. I don't know if you've read him, know of him. He wrote the Weapons of Mass Instruction and Dumbing Us Down and things like that. He was a 30-year school teacher, and he talks about the genius that is common in everybody, and that is repressed by the government indoctrination system. I'd love to get your take on education in general.
Oh, Gatto was heroic,
Yeah.
and he's absolutely right. I mean, I believe that every person is unique, one of a kind, and that what you're really trying to do is develop yourself. It's sort of like a improve yourself kit that you're given at birth, you know, and you're trying to find out, okay, where do I fit in this journey from life to death? And it's a great journey. That's why it's so bizarre to me to see so many young people checking out of life with these suicide rates. I mean, to me, that's the conclusive sign that something is fundamentally wrong with American society.
No purpose.
Right, and there's no opportunities or dynamism, and they're being indoctrinated with the notion that this is freedom.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the best there is, they're saying, I'm checking out. But if they know that this is not a free society, all of a sudden they say, oh, well, maybe there's something better and there is something better. But to address your question specifically, you look at any kid from 0 to 6, and his eyes are wide open, and he's just absorbing everything. I mean, just taking it all in, this awe of the universe. And then when he can talk, he starts bedeviling his parents with that horrific three-letter question.
Why?
Why? Stop it. You're driving me crazy. All right, by the time he goes into the public school system and he gets out at 18, that's been drummed out of him.
Yeah.
People hate school. They hate reading. They hate education. Most of them, not all.
Even the teachers, that's why they have so many days off. Yeah.
That's right. It's a bad system. My sister was a public school teacher.
My wife was. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good people in a bad system.
Yep.
And so it orients toward indoctrination, toward conformity. To me, it's like Army Light. That's the way public schooling is. It's funded. It's a socialist system. The government school teachers, government textbooks, government curriculum, and what's horrible is they smash out of you this awe of the universe and this thirst for learning. And they did it to me. And I didn't get it back till I discovered libertarianism.
Me too.
And when you discover libertarianism, notice something. Nobody's cramming it into you. You're seeking it.
Yeah.
You're absorbing it. You're studying everything you can. That's what education is about. It's seeking. So you get rid of the public school system. You have a free market educational system, which is what Gatto was talking about, separating school and state. You would have the greatest, most dynamic, educated citizenry you could ever hope to manage. Because that's what free markets bring into existence, the best of everything.
Golly.
I definitely appreciate the focus on what is going on in people's minds. The clip we played of you in a previous episode was when you were talking about the war on terror again, and you were talking about the suicide rate of veterans, which they say is 22, but it's actually much higher. And you pointed specifically on the fact that these people who he sent to do horrible things, when they, on top of everything else, thought that they were going to do something virtuous, that's probably what's contributing to the suicide rate is that there is a moral quandrum going on in their brain and they just can't take it. And the fact that you're also pointing out that this is happening in society because of untruths, right? We're telling people that this is what it's like to be free. As something different than most candidates, that's the most exciting thing that I hear from you. It might be because I've been within the libertarian circle for a while, so I know all the other aspects. But just to tell you that on a personal note, that specifically speaks to me, and I think gives a lot of hope.
That's very gratifying because I so totally believe it. I mean, you talk to any psychiatrist, and he will tell you that a person that's denying reality is going to suffer a psychosis.
Sure.
And so you have this massive denial of reality in American society where people are convinced they live in a free country. They thank the troops for defending their freedom when the troops are over there thousands of miles away killing people that are not threatening our freedom.
We are absolutely exponentially less free since 2001. Since the NDA, since the Patriot Act, the induction of the police state in terms of giving all this extra money and equipment and everything. It's horrendous. And in our lifetime. I mean, that's the thing is, as an adult, even probably one of the first generations to see it up close and personal. Well, you could even vote to see how it's been ramped up into high gear. It's amazing to me to see that people are still going, yeah, America, America, America.
Well, there's a practical question that is begged, I think, and I've encountered it here, where people make the argument like, why are you being so pessimistic? America is still the freest country in the world, and there are a lot of ways that argument makes sense comparatively to the rest of the world. We have a lot of freedom.
Comfortable.
How do you talk to somebody who because they're suffering the denial of reality, maybe they don't want to acknowledge and be defeatist? How do you talk to somebody like that and bring them some reality while at the same time not crushing their spirit, which is already very crushed?
I think that as somebody whose mind is closed, you're just wasting your time. I mean, you would never convince a Donald Trump or any of his strong supporters that they're not free. They're convinced they're free. I think there's a large segment of society that knows there's something wrong in this country.
Yeah.
They can sense it. I mean, you can look at these suicide rates and say, well, my gosh, something's not right here. Massive drug addiction and stuff, which is what you find in socialist countries. And so I think those are the people you reach just with truth and principles. I mean, that's how we all discovered libertarianism, usually indirectly, not because
drug
somebody
use?
was
No.
not through drug use.
I'm just kidding.
That we just keep pounding away with our principles, and then people discover us, and then they join up with us. And I think that's the way you do it, just through truth. I think that if more young people were to discover that this is not a free society, it's a bunch of false indoctrination, I think you'd see a lot of the suicide rate going down. And one of the reasons I know about this is because we had a supporter at the Future of Freedom Foundation, which I should emphasize is not endorsing my campaign. They can't do that. But he was in the Korean War. He was a Korean veteran, and he got hit by a mortar on the very last day he was coming home. He had volunteered for a mission, and he got blown up. He was a paraplegic. And he decided to... he was in pain all of his life, and he was lived to his 80s. Well, when he discovered us, a friend of mine introduced me to him and said he was he was threatening to commit suicide because his life was just he felt it was just been wasted. Well, he found us, and he learned about what we were doing. His whole life, his whole perspective changed. Yeah. And he had a reason for living. He started donating to us. He started discovering other places, Hillsdale College and other libertarian organizations. The guy just got energized, and he died a natural death rather than suicide. And I thought, wow, that could spread among people when they discover the truth, that all of a sudden you got a reason for living. I want to live a free society. I'm going to fight for a free society. I'm not checking out. I'm going to...
Just getting started.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you what, libertarianism, that's what saved me. I mean, to come back and see all of this and to bring, friends from the battlefield into this idea of liberty and say, hey, listen, guys, I know what they told us over there, was we're fighting for America and liberty and rights and all this kind of stuff. Listen, that fight's here. The enemy is within, and it's time to get to work here. It's going to take a ton of work, a massive Herculean effort to make it happen. And it is, I'm telling you, like, I do this all the time just for those guys. Just go out and talk to them, say, plant a seed. I tell banks all the time, here's a little food, right? Like a baby bird. Don't give them too much. Just give them a little bit so they don't throw it up and they never want to talk to you again, right? Just a little bit. And I'll tell you, you give them a little bit and they come back to you before long, maybe couple months down the line going, oh man, have you read Economics in One Lesson? Or have you read Bastiat? And you're like, yeah, man, isn't it great? Like, here, take some more. And now you can just start giving them book after book after book. And it's just, it's absolutely life-changing for sure.
Oh yeah. Then they surpass the teacher, and then they start getting convinced that they're the ones that brought you into this.
That's right. And they can make the claim, I don't care.
What a wonderful problem to have.
Right.
Hey, man, we've occupied about 35 minutes of your time.
Thank you so much for being generous. I'll just end on one kind of personal question. Is there something that you are very excited about, some kind of hobby, some new gin you like, whatever, something personal you're excited about?
I'm just excited about liberty. I mean, I just love what I do in my life, and this race has really changed the course of my life. I mean, my life was pretty peaceful in the educational arena, and now entering the political arena. And I knew this. I mean, there's a few negative aspects of the political process, but I just love what I'm doing. I mean, it's just energized me going to these conventions and doing what I'm doing in North Carolina. It's changed the course of my life at this point, and it's just a positive change.
That's awesome.
It's been a pleasure to meet you, Jake.
Let's take a second and tell us how we can help
absolutely.
you out.
Oh, yeah. JacobForLiberty.com. Come and look at my blog because that's where I'm really keeping people apprised of what I'm doing. And I put videos up there, video messages, and then my upcoming appearances. And I mean, I need support.
Your social media is good. I'll tell you, your guys are good. I've talked to them quite a few times, and they're great guys.
Oh, I've got the best.
Yeah.
I mean, I am the luckiest guy. I got the best campaign manager, Jake Porter from Iowa. Every time I mention his name, it'd be like people go, "Wow, you got Jake Porter," and then the social media guys, they're volunteering their time. I mean, I'm just not a great social media guy. I like interacting with people personally and going out campaigning like that. But these guys have helped me out tremendously. And so if anybody wants to help out, they can volunteer. My social media guys, my campaign manager said, your volunteers are just multiplying. And he said, look at North Carolina. And he says, you've got 5 times the number of volunteers in North Carolina, which is it's a payoff for what we're doing there. But I need financial support. I'm running a low-cost guerrilla campaign, but I need the $25 donations, the $50 donations, the $100 donations, the $1,000 donations. I mean, anything people can give, I'd be very, very grateful. And you can go to the blog section and see what I'm doing with people's money. I'm putting it to good use.
That's awesome. Well, safe travels to you.
Hey, thanks, guys. It's an honor and a pleasure. You guys are good, man.
Been a lot of fun. Been looking forward to this for a long time. So
it's my
if
pleasure.
you want to come back anytime, just give us a shout.
I would love it. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you, your listeners.
All right. Good with mics?
Yep.
Got to have that thing pretty close.
Yep.
And you can put the headphones on if you'd like.
If you like, you don't have to. It's more or less for us to make sure we can hear everybody.
Okay.
All right, we're back again. We got Blake Ashby. He is running for the Libertarian Party president.
I am.
Position here.
Just
welcome
bumping into presidential candidates.
I know.
I know. Well, they're kind of telling people down the hall, hey, if you want to get on the radio, take a left.
Yeah, come on up. This is The Rebellion, by the way. I don't know if this is your favorite podcast or not. I hope it will be in the future.
You know, I'm late to the Libertarian Party. Joined officially earlier or last year. Had been a longtime Republican. Left, I guess, about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I just couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah. So where are you from, and what's your background?
I'm actually from a place called Ferguson, Missouri, of all places.
Yeah, right on.
And I've been doing startups for about 30 years.
How's Ferguson these days?
You know, Ferguson was fine before. We we had that situation, but it's a nice little community. It's actually one of the most integrated places in St. Louis, so it continues to be.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you sitting down and making a little bit of time for us. We like to understand, people's background and what brought them over. You're a former Republican?
Former Republican, correct.
Neocon? Warhawk?
No, since I was 17 years old, I've been writing about liberty and freedom and capitalism.
Really?
And I just got to the point where I was just so disappointed with the Republican Party that I had no choice but to leave. And, I'm hoping the libertarians kind of meet me halfway. I espouse a brand of libertarianism I call practical libertarianism.
Okay.
I do believe there's a role for the federal government. And if you talk to a Democrat, they've got this tendency to say, we should make that free. We should make that free, right? Sometimes in the Libertarian Party, there's a tendency to say, we should just eliminate that. We should just eliminate that. And at the end of the day, we are not going to eliminate the National Highway System. We're not going to eliminate the FAA. So I am running because the Libertarian Party has a real chance to get attention in this election.
Okay.
On the left, you have, Bernie is a socialist, right? So you've got one side that wants to completely abandon capitalism. On the right, you have intellectual incoherence. I really can't say what his strategy is or his thoughts are. So firmly in the middle is something called democratic capitalism. And democratic capitalism is a compromise we reached in the 1930s. We stick with the free market, but we use the power of democracy to moderate the free market to ensure everybody gets in the game, everybody plays by the same set of rules, and everybody benefits from our economy. We have slipped away from the compromise of democratic capitalism, and it is hurting our country. the Libertarian Party can embrace that message, and it is a message that extends free will and extends freedom, and actually have a chance to get some attention in the presidential election.
So
I am chomping at the bit now.
I know. I assume that you understand that some of the pushback will be that it fundamentally, even if you put democracy in front of a word, that still means that a majority of people, even if it's a smaller majority than you'd like you'd like 100% of people to get along.
Maybe not even a plurality
with everything, and it'd be all kumbaya. But that's not how the world works. So 51% of people would be able to tell 49% of people what they prefer, and the only way to make that a reality is to force it on those people.
Okay, but we've got this situation, right? Every square inch of the United States of America is already owned by somebody or something, right? There's no part of this country that does not have an owner already. And so we lose sight of the fact that, government can certainly be coercive, but the market can be coercive too. If I, chose to live in the Gulf of Mexico and Deepwater Horizon blew, there's something called in economics called an involuntary risk market. I did not know I was part of the risk market for Deepwater Horizon, right? And so we need a federal government at some level, not a huge level, obviously, but at some level to protect us from the coercion of the market.
So the first thing that comes to mind is I think it's a Thomas Jefferson quote. He says that he'd rather be inconvenienced by the problems of liberty, he doesn't say problems, than the tyranny of government. What I would imagine a lot of libertarians would say that, hey, the problems of liberty, which we see on a daily basis, right? We interact with people voluntarily all the time. People cut us off in traffic and so forth, are better than a government that has proven to always do things first. We had a speaker who was saying that it's kind of like a ratchet. They've only got one motion, which is forward, and they never go back when they've exercised all that force.
I would agree that there's an institutional tendency to go forward instead of to go back. Every once in a while, it does go back just a little bit. And the fact of the matter is, our size of government has remained relatively stable over the last several decades.
So on a more positive note, what are the things that you could agree should be eliminated completely? That way we can find some common ground.
That's too simple a question, right? I mean, because you can look at something like the FAA, and you could say, well, the FAA could do a better job, right? They've got issues with screening. They might have issues with pilot training. Who knows what it is, right?
What about a cannabis SWAT team task force?
Yes, absolutely. We can eliminate that.
Then that's a common ground.
Yes, cannabis should be legal.
So I'm gonna scale back from anarchism and really even minarchism and give this even a chance at the constitutional level for myself.
Yep.
Being a constitutional scholar and understanding how the anti-federalists railed and predicted and were prophetic about what would happen and where we are today when they were going into the compact, which is the Constitution. When you talk about democratic capitalism, when we look at the country and its constitution, this constitution is very much sacrosanct in terms of what we should and should not be doing for a very good reason, because they knew the horrors of an out of control arbitrary government. How does democratic capitalism stay away from arbitrariness and stave off the arbitrariness that is just endemic of governments in general?
Yeah, well, and you've kind of hit it right there, right? I mean, institutionally, governments tend toward arbitrariness, right? That's just how it works, right?
Yeah.
We pass a law, we've still got laws against, riding your carriage on the wrong side of the street, right? Mm-hmm. It's very hard to strip away some of those rights or powers of government, right? But at the end of the day, we have to figure out that compromise, because we can't do without the federal government.
Why?
Well, because I don't want to eat tainted meat. I don't want planes.
But here, I'm gonna stop you there, because the FAA, the DEA, the FDA, Food, Drug, and all these guys have not only been inaccurate, they have absolutely failed, and then on top of it, been lobbied to accept places in companies like Monsanto and that have poisoned the food supply, that have gone out of their way to strip things like labels from meat packaging, from a myriad of things. And so I fundamentally disagree that the federal government is even a remotely good apparatus to make sure that happens, especially in a day and age where we have technology. You've got Yelp, you've got Amazon, you have the market reviewing in real time the things, the products, and the services that we're consuming. And I think people can make a much better judgment call from their fellow human beings who are consumers versus people who are receiving money and funding and things like that from corporations or private entities, charities, whatever the case might be, to says, hey, we'd like to do this over here, and oh, by the way, we're going to slip you a whole bunch of money to make sure that you're in that seat.
Okay, and I'm not, I'm not trying to paint an entirely rosy picture of government. The stuff you're talking about is true, right? Government agencies tend to get captured by the people who are supposed to regulate. But why would you assume that Yelp would do a better job of identifying fraud than the federal government? Because at the end of the day, Yelp can be hacked just like the government can be. It's easy to say that we can crowdsource some of these things. In the real world, that's never proven to be true.
Yeah, but here's the thing: Yelp is not through conscription; it's not through force, whereas the government absolutely is.
Okay, but it becomes a question of time, right? And so let's take a step back.
And I'll also say this, because Yelp, if Yelp it becomes one of those apps or organizations that is no longer very accurate, it will also be swept to the dustbin of history through competition.
And there's a million examples of that in the market.
Sure.
that happen all the time, where when a business disrespects its customers, they fail.
Yeah, I mean, Walmart put mom and pop out of business, and now Amazon is obviously changing the game with even Walmart. And so I fail to see it.
But take a step back, right? I mean, think about when we actually started regulating food, right? It was at the turn of the 1900s. Upton Sinclair wrote a book called The Jungle.
Okay.
He talked about the meat packing practices in Chicago. They were,
which we all know is a perfectly great town for government.
Great town for government, yeah. But so after The Jungle was published, it wasn't, the citizens that asked for the FDA. It was Armour and Swift. It was the packing companies. Mm-hmm. And the reason is, if you go back to Adam Smith's sheep markets, right? You remember everybody read the book, right? The sheep markets, right? In the sheep market, I can know if the sheep is healthy. I can look in his eyes. I can open his mouth. I can feel his fur, right? I've got some ability to know what kind of product I'm getting and some ability to know the sellers, right? Mm-hmm. That does not happen in a national economy. You can't have a national economy without a national government. There has to be somebody in the role of arbiter of claims to say that if I actually buy that can of green beans, it's really green beans inside.
So are you saying that there's no private certification, private labels that exists? Because there's probably, I would guess, tens of thousands.
Well,
and it's a blended system, right?
And I think the cannabis market is probably a great place to look for a lot of this kind of stuff, because cannabis is one of those things where, it was really kind of swept under the rug for a long time. And what has happened within the cannabis industry is, it was unregulated. The FDA couldn't touch it, obviously, because it's still illegal at the federal level. And now people, they've had to come up with their own testing. They've had to come up with their own certifications. And it's more or less through the trade that these things have happened, where, they get together as a conglomerate, basically, of free people that just want to make sure that they are meeting the bar.
Okay, but that's true and that's not true, right? And this is the problem with any kind of voluntary regulation. They did a study of CBD creams a couple of 3 years ago, right? The CBD percentage ranged from what was stated on the label to zero. There was, literally zero CBD in some of the creams they tested that claimed to be, 3% CBD, right? And we had a pot farm in California for a couple of years, right? So we had some experience. The testing regulations were actually set by the state, and now
in California.
Yeah, but you name a state, the testing regulations have eventually been set by the state.
Eventually, but before that, it was starting to happen.
It's starting to happen. Yeah. I agree. So I'm not saying that there's not some blend of federal responsibilities and private responsibilities and industry responsibilities. I'm saying that you can't pretend we can't have a federal government, right? And this is where it gets to be a problem for the Libertarian Party, right? The President of the United States runs the federal government. If our campaign
But not through the Constitution, he doesn't. Through the Constitution, he's just the executive. He is there for negotiations. War, peace, negotiations, foreign commerce. That's it.
Fair enough, right?
And he's not in charge of most of those things.
Okay,
well,
but
he's not in charge of policy of those things. He's only in charge of executing what he's
Negotiations.
been allowed to do.
Right.
Yeah, and that's it.
And if it's outside, if it comes to him through Congress and it's outside of the Constitution, he has the check and balance to say, we're not doing that anymore.
Understood. But at a practical level, the president kind of oversees the federal government, the bureaucracy, right? At a practical level, right? And so if we're running, if I'm a libertarian running to be president, I can't get up there and if somebody says our highways are in terrible shapes, I can't say, I think we need to localize that. That's not a real answer, right? Because it's not a real answer.
Well, I could even envisage talking about things that are harder to debate with people, like, well, who's going to build the roads? But it seems like you've taken a stand on something that's very easy to show that the market is already in that arena. But to make something a little bit more arbitrary, they'll let us kind of discuss the idea more. You talked about responsibility, and if the free market that currently exists can't convince you, if you take a child and you make it impossible for that child to see the consequences of their actions, if every time that child is going to fall, for example, you make sure it doesn't fall, at some point, and I don't know, I don't want to say that society is this collective, but at some point you're taking away information from a society to where you might be right. Maybe they do need an all omnipotent person who is always there to protect them, but is that a very good long-term plan to make a society so unaware of the world and the risk that exists in the world that we have to have an omnipotent parent who, by history's own facts, is very dangerous at the same time?
Oh yeah, and I'm not by no means suggesting omnipotence for the federal government or any level of government.
Except when it comes to food, apparently.
No. At the end of the day, I just want the food. I want the food that's described on the label to be the food that's inside the container.
So, real quick question: per the 9th and 10th Amendment, all the rights that are not enumerated, obviously reserved to the people, and all the delegated powers not specifically defined to the federal government are reserved to the states. So why is it not? Why are we going outside of the constitutional realm at the federal level that obviously constructs the federal government and taking delegated authority arbitrarily away from the states to do these things?
All right, and so you said arbitrarily, right?
Food. For example, commerce. None of those are powers of the federal government.
Actually, the federal government does have the right to control trade between the states.
No, they don't.
The Commerce Clause.
They're supposed to keep it regular.
So no, and here's the thing: is the Commerce Clause is a piece of history. I think it was Iowa, where this guy was growing wheat on his own land for his own cattle, and the federal government came in and said, "You're affecting commerce, interstate commerce at that." Because you're not going out there and participating in a market. And so the Supreme Court came in and said, now we are in charge of interstate commerce. The Supreme Court upheld the opinion, not the ruling. And ever since then, it's been bastardized to where it has been the powers per the Federalist 45, where Madison wrote, the powers are few and defined.
Yep.
Commerce clauses aren't defined. Clauses are, generally speaking, descriptive of what those very delegated powers are, mostly Article 1, Section 8.
Okay, but
they do not have the power of commerce.
But historically, the courts, the Senate, the House, the President have all given the federal government the ability to control interstate commerce. And because of that...
I'm going to stop you. I'm going to stop you right there, because here's the problem with that. Those people... The separation of powers exists for a very good reason, right? It's so that the parties of the contract are what? The states. The parties of the contract are the states. So in contract law or compact law, the parties are more powerful than the product. The Constitution, being the compact itself, creates the federal government. Yeah. So a federal government that can expand or change its powers outside of an Article 5 amendment is an arbitrary government.
And I disagree, right? If you're hold on a second. So you're saying that there should be no federal highway system? Yes or no?
I'm saying that post roads, sure.
Okay, but federal highway systems
post roads are constitutional.
Okay, but the highway system is not a post road.
I agree with you totally.
Okay, so you're saying there should be no federal highway system.
I'm saying that roads are no part of the federal government's delegated.
So there should be no federal highway system.
No.
Okay, and there should be no FAA.
No.
Okay, and there should be no USDA, right?
Is it a delegate? Has there been an Article 5 amendment to change the powers of the federal government.
Okay, but that's obviously that's a very strict view, right? But so this is the quandary we're getting.
If we're going to have rules and then we violate them, could you not understand how some people don't understand why we have rules in the first place and get kind of frustrated with the whole system?
I understand, but
and you're putting the system a little bit on the pedestal. That's
No,
that's perfectly.
on-
I mean, it's perfectly fine. You're giving it. You're saying it's at least somewhat legitimate. If somebody's going to make that argument, I just want them to at least follow their own rules.
Okay, but there have been lots of people that have looked at the Commerce Clause and said, well, that does allow a federal.
They did
highway
the same
system.
thing with slavery.
Understood, right? And we fixed it, right? I'm not saying that the government.
So to fix this, in your own words,
well, hold on. Now, the slavery was not tied to the Commerce Clause.
no, but slavery was wrong, and justices upheld an opinion that slavery was okay.
For several decades.
Yeah,
Yes, I understand.
so now that they're still upholding bad practice, how do we fix it?
Okay. And apparently in the Libertarian Party, or your view, right,
Sure.
you're saying that.
I'm just saying even from a constitutional perspective, which I'm far past.
Okay, but you're taking a very narrow view of the Constitution. It
I'm
was
taking a
intended to be
very narrow view of what history demonstrates and is replete with, is that anytime you get away from a very, very strict piece of Constitution, you get arbitrary government. And arbitrary government killed 200 million people in the last century alone.
Okay, but in the United States of America, there is broad legal acceptance that the Commerce Clause allows the federal government to have a U.S. highway system.
Sure, and why did they do that?
Because you can't have a national economy without a national government.
Oh, of course you can. Was there a fur trade before? There was a fur trade. There was a spice trade. There was an ore trade. There was international
Like
trade.
you could literally go forever, probably.
And literally,
Except that those
ti-
aren't national economies, right? Those
timber.
are activities.
Well,
You
those
can't
things
have a
constitute
national economy without a national government. That has been proven over and over
That
again in history.
economy grew the fastest growing, out of the muck and out of the mire population that the world has ever seen. An unregulated economy where people and goods and services cross, wherever they want to cross to communicate, to sell, to trade services and goods.
Which economy are you talking about? Which world? You're talking about the United States?
Yeah.
United States has had the Constitution for 230 years.
Yeah, but before that, even before that, when people came here and they were trading anything and everything, what gave rise to America.
I understand. But again, I come back to there has to be somebody in the role of the arbiter of claims, right? And in the real world.
Yeah, the individual.
Okay, but see, I don't want to have to spend time worrying if the can of beans is really can of beans, right?
Well, that's
Here,
for
let
you.
me give you an example, right?
And here's the thing is,
so you're wanting a product and service. I just don't understand the inclination to demand that product and service be paid for by other people by force.
I don't want to pay for that.
Well,
I don't think you could give that many examples, and there's a few that I think would be a reasonable discussion. That many examples of a product and service you want that you can't find out in the free market. I mean, I'm
Okay, but
I'm
what
not
do you
trying
mean
to
by
put you
free market, right? There are 25 companies doing canned beans.
here's the thing is, if he's got some apples and I got some money, and I want to buy those apples from him, I should be able to do that anywhere.
Absolutely.
I'm
but
just
how
saying,
do
I
you
want an
know that his
example.
apples aren't
Doesn't
tainted?
matter.
And see, so
Because there are people who are willing to. They currently do it even with the government competition being overwhelming. There are people who are willing to sell you the service of telling you that apple is certified organic by the
I don't
Banks
need
and
the
Chain
government to tell
Association.
me stuff. I don't, as an adult, I don't need another adult to do my homework for
so
me.
you don't need the government to tell you that the plane you flew in on was safe.
No.
And who would tell you that you would trust?
Well, I'm telling you right now, if planes start falling out of the sky, who's going to fly?
Nobody. And that's exactly why you need the national government.
Have
without-
planes fallen out of the sky? Yes. So the government didn't fix that problem.
Far fewer planes fall out of the sky in our economy than most places in the world.
Can you prove that wouldn't happen to the same scale or better in a more free market economy?
If you're suggesting that you think airline safety would be better,
Oh, I can tell you right now. I've worked in aerospace for almost 20 years.
and so you think airline safety would be better
I think
if we didn't have the federal government.
the regulations, and I know the regulations that the FAA puts into aerospace are ridiculous.
We
They're
had a pilot-
costly. They remove innovation. They take away from IR&D type budgets of those companies to make a far superior product.
We had a pilot on this show basically say, yes, what they do is they rapidly go through all the stuff they have to, all all the burdensome regulation and don't do it well so that they can focus on the other stuff. It's just a burden on them. And when it's not given by real price signals, so the price signal of if Shane and I don't want to go in your plane because we don't trust you, that is a real price signal that they need to address. When it's stuff that is, and here's where you have a claim. Of course, there's some kind of truth. The regulations don't come out of thin air, so there's always some kind of, hey, we want safety there. But it's also because government doesn't get the right price signals, filled with muck and stupidity and waste and sometimes outright corruption. And
all of
they're
that
not able to actually pay attention to the customer. This is probably the most horrific example is the vaccine industry, which the government has literally said they have no responsibility. We'll just make sure that we block all price signals because we'll pay off anybody who has a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, but back to the airlines, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fact of the matter is that because we have that guarantor of claims, somebody that most people trust to work.
Wait. I hate to interrupt you, but when you say most people trust,
everybody that gets on an airplane, everybody that gets on an airplane has some level of trust in the
Congress.
FAA.
Yeah, but they don't have. They have what is the latest congressional approval? Somewhere around 9. The bureaucrats even worse than that. I don't trust those guys as far as I can throw them.
People vote with their dollars when they get on a plane.
It's true to some degree.
Yeah.
But what choice do they have?
That's the best system we have. We're saying it could be better.
It's a coerced choice, is what I'm saying.
But so you think that private regulation of airline safety would be better than federal regulation?
I know it would be.
And why do you know it would be?
Highly convinced.
I've been in aerospace for almost 20 years.
No, you've been in aerospace looking at the regulations, saying these regulations could be done different or better. Go to a pilot and say, hey, would you like to have no regulations at all? Would you like to have no FAA looking to make sure that the plane can actually lift itself up?
So maybe it'd be better if we understand that regulation, maybe there'd be even more regulation. It just wouldn't be government regulation, which the problem with government regulation is not because it's called government, it's not the word, it's because it's arbitrary. And the main reason is because the price signals, so the price signals they're not just about what the price should be, but all the signals that customers who interface with a product or service are corrupted. That is the main problem. The government, because it uses force, which is an unnatural, that doesn't sound right. It's not an unnatural thing, but it's not voluntary, is messing up all the signals that the consumer should be receiving.
Yep. But not disagreeing on the price signals, right?
Okay.
I mean, also that's the basic economic truth, right? I'm not disagreeing with that. But the answer is to figure out how to make the price signals fit with the federal government and how to deal with the corruption in the federal government.
That would be a great, I wish there was a solution, but I don't think there's a solution to that. I think intrinsically, when you use force and you force people to do things, and
the means will never justify the ends.
but
anecdotes don't prove anything, but I think we have so many anecdotes.
But we've got this issue, right? Because you can say, oh, well, it's a free market. If I don't like something, I can just leave, right?
Why does the free market fix itself?
But I can't leave the government. They're going to continue to take my money at gunpoint to pay for something that I don't want.
Well, no, you could leave the country. You could leave the United States. But where could you go that has a lower tax rate than the United States of America? Anywhere?
There's other places. I don't
quite a
know
few
off the top of
places,
my
I think.
That have lower tax rates than the United States?
Sure.
Andorra.
Of course. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, a few, right? But
Belize.
But if you're talking about a mid-size or larger country, generally speaking, the United States has one of the lowest tax rates, one of the smallest governments in the world.
So we're just less bad?
So
less bad does not excite me whatsoever.
But
my question, taxation is theft. No?
Taxation is voluntary. If we don't like it, we can vote against it. If 51% of the people think we're paying too much in taxes, we can vote against it.
So hold on. So that's like somebody pointing a gun at you. Haha, it's actually the same thing. And you saying no, being shot is voluntary because you can vote against it. What if most people vote that you should get shot? So that doesn't intrinsically make it right.
Yeah. So democratic
virtue doesn't come from democracy.
Democratically, it's just mob rule. Democratically, 51% of the population gets to tell the other 49% what to do.
Well, and hopefully we've got protections built into the Constitution that limits that.
Yeah, but you're saying we don't already because of the exercise of the Commerce Clause outside of its constitutional boundaries.
The Commerce Clause is not as elastic as people make it out to be, right? I mean, the Commerce Clause doesn't allow me to say I get to shoot somebody I don't like, right? The right to swing your fist ends at my nose.
Actually, I mean, our current government does sometimes, all the time, or very often say it can shoot who they don't like. They do it.
They do it all the time.
Just the other day. There was a missile came out of the sky and shot somebody they didn't like, not in
Within
accordance
the United
with
States
their
of
own
America, you can't use the Commerce Clause to justify shooting a bunch of people.
I'm having fun with this conversation. Do you have to go anywhere right now?
No, they won't let me in the debate. I got too late.
Eric Garner died because they literally didn't like some of the commerce he was doing.
So let's move on topics. Where you stand on our foreign policy?
I would prefer that we had fewer interventions, and I believe that there needs to be a United Nations Department of Democracy, because I do believe that democracy should be spread throughout the world. I don't think the U.S.
By
government,
force?
No, by persuasion, right? Making it option, making it aware that it's there, right? But so
you want us to pay more money into the UN?
I wouldn't mind paying a little more money into the UN if the UN would have a Department of Democracy.
How much more in taxes do you give every year to the IRS? Do you take any kind of deductions?
I'm not sure what you're asking me.
Do you take deductions from when you file taxes every year?
Yeah.
Why?
Because the tax code allows me to.
Okay, so you're voluntarily you would like to do something like this. Why don't you just give them more money to do it? You're free to do so.
Me giving the federal government more money doesn't create a United Nations Department of Democracy.
Yeah, but you have maybe if you lobbied them and started putting more money and say, hey, take this money what I'm saying is,
but that's not the way the government works, obviously.
So it's forced charity at this point. It's make me pay more.
If the majority of the people in the United States of America supported the idea of a United Nations Department of Democracy, then yes, I think we should.
51% of people are going to now hold another gun to Americans' head and say you need to give more of your hard-earned money. Now I mean, I don't know if you know this statistic or not, but Americans pay more in taxes than they pay for food and clothing in every year.
I would say that.
Do you think that's right?
I say that's likely true of every country.
Yeah, but I don't want to do whataboutism in comparison. Do you think it's moral to take more money in taxes and put it towards federal government spending and waste and bureaucracy than people spend on food and clothing in a year?
Okay, but the question is, what is that money paying for?
No,
that is absolutely the question, right?
So
you're saying that the cost is worth it.
I'm saying that we continue to make that determination every year, every generation. But generally speaking, the money we pay for government doesn't go into the ether, right? It goes to provide something.
Oh man.
Let's make this very personal then.
Yeah.
Let's say there's the three of us right here.
Yeah.
And both of you, Shane and Blake, both support this new UN democracy unit group, and you guys vote.
I don't know why you're using me.
Because
you want to use yourself.
Because you're there, Shane. And the two of you agree that it's a great thing, and I don't want to give one penny to it because I don't think that they do a good job. I think they do a bad job. Okay,
that's fine.
The premise. So you'd be comfortable. I'm taking Shane out of it because
I'm kidding, thanks.
You'd be comfortable with the government coming to my house and effectively putting a gun to my head and forcing me to give them money. What would make you comfortable with taking my money by force?
If 51% of the country said it would make sense for us all to chip in $1 and put that toward the United Nations.
So why don't you just have the 51% do it?
At the end of the day, the way the tax system works is we all dump our money in this big bucket. And
by force. No. It is being extracted from me at gunpoint.
I'm just trying to understand
you laugh.
I do laugh. But you keep saying at gunpoint. Where is the gun? Are you not enjoying your life at some level? Do you not have some kind of freedom?
I want more freedom.
What more freedom do you want? I asked a Republican. I heard a Republican one time.
I got you. Here's the freedom. I'm gonna answer your question with a question. Tell me what is not taxed, permitted, licensed. Tell me what you can do in America these days. Tell me where we don't have violations of every amendment. Well, tell me that first.
I don't think we have violations of every amendment in most of the world.
I can tell you.
I don't think me sitting right here is in violation.
On a daily, we paid more money for this microphone because there are regulations that up the cost. I took a shower that had less water pressure because the government puts a little water flow restrictor inside the waterhead per federal regulation on a daily basis.
No, the government does not require that your shower head be constrained, right? That is a voluntary thing.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
It is absolutely.
Absolutely is not. It is absolutely not. With Congress passed, I think, a couple of years ago, and I think Rand Paul was one of the guys that talked about it. He's like, I can't even go and use my bathroom the way I used to anymore because I've got to flush it, at least 2 or 3 times, and it's not even sanitary.
Okay,
low flow toilets, low flow faucets, low flow shower heads. They all exist because of the federal government regulation.
You can open it up and
EPA.
You can take out the choke point and it's the fine.
Sure.
I don't want to have to do that, and I don't want to have to pay the extra cost or time or to have to do that.
We're having this grand conversations about freedom lost, and your answer is, well, my water pressure is not
I gave you examples, but it's on everything that you see.
But what's the big example?
Civil asset forfeiture.
What's that?
Civil asset forfeiture.
So you've had stuff seized?
Tons and tons of Americans have.
Absolutely. It's a terrible thing.
Do you know that civil asset forfeiture was a bigger chunk of what was taken than everything stolen by criminals?
Okay, so what's the answer, right? So that is absolutely, civil asset forfeiture has been abused, right?
Followed by the same courts.
Absolutely, right. So is the answer to do away with the court system, or is it to fix forfeiture? Which one is it?
Hold on, but
I'm going to go with the prior,
but you're not wanting us to encompass everything. You're wanting to say the government has certain roles that should be done by government because they're better at it. I don't understand how, but then you're saying that we're arguing that we should just get rid of the whole thing. Now, I definitely think that there can be private courts, and a lot of the times they would work better.
They used to work better when they were.
There's historical examples, but we didn't say get rid of the whole courts. We just said get rid of civil asset forfeiture, which is literally it's not complicated. It's law.
Yes.
In
Georgia law
I agree.
Or
So
in
it's
state laws,
violation.
you just take a crayon.
So that's a violation of the Fourth Amendment.
Absolutely.
Second Amendment.
Absolutely. No. Forfeiture is clearly one of the easiest examples of how government is overstepped.
So let's look at Second Amendment. All gun laws are unconstitutional. Yes or no?
No.
You believe that gun laws are constitutional?
I believe some gun laws can be constitutional. Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. First Amendment, let's just do it with freedom of association because you have your belief system, right? Freedom of association, you think we should be told how and when and what to teach our kids if we homeschool?
I think they need to get the basics, yes. And homeschooling is a special situation, right? Because
that's not. It's actually what it's just different in the past. I don't know, 100.
It's the default.
100. The past 100 years. Before that, throughout history, it was homeschool.
Understood.
And people were far brighter and far more well studied. You look at the Silence Do-Good letters.
Far fewer people were actually educated.
I don't think so.
I believe that's
when you look at the education that was provided by candlelight and fire and books that were passed around, far superior to what the government indoctrination system's doing now.
Well, the problem
is
you seem to be defaulting the fact that it's because government was there that happened.
And you understand
I'm not even stating that it's because we have the free market and more technology and Facebook and the internet and we have all the information on our phone, but at least don't default to just being like, well, that's because we have government schools.
But wait, but education is local, right? So
no. We just spent $70 billion at the federal level on education.
I understand, but that's a drop in the bucket for overall spending.
It just took $70 billion away from private individuals.
Understood. But
can you tell me about missed opportunity then? You just took $70 billion out of the economy to pay for what I'll tell you right now is a failing educational system, indoctrination system at that. And that's okay?
But you're shifting. Every time I start to answer a question, you shift to a different question. And my point was that schools started off locally with people in a community deciding we want to educate our children together because it's more efficient, right? So are you saying we should end local schools?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Well, no, but if local schools are funded by people who
government funded, yes,
voluntarily contribute. There's in Georgia, there's a halfway solution where people can get a tax deduction or a tax credit. I think it's $80 million pool, so they can fund private schools. Those people are literally funding for probably hundreds of thousands of students' private schooling. There's nothing wrong with that.
But the vast majority of funding into public education comes from property taxes, and it is local and it is voluntary.
Oh,
I don't pay my property tax voluntarily. I don't even have a child.
I'm a homeschooler.
That's fine.
And they take money away from me teaching my kids every year to send to the public school systems that I think are atrocious.
Okay, so that's your example of how your freedom has been impacted by local government, right?
I could do this all day.
Okay, but for everything you could point to, I can point to by any quantifiable measure, people in the United States have more freedom today than anybody had 50 years ago.
But not
or
because
100
of
years
government.
You're saying that the highway system doesn't give us more freedom?
I absolutely think it does not give us more freedom.
No, I think it gives us
more.
more.
You don't think the FAA gives us more freedom?
I absolutely don't.
No, it's a poor substitute. But again, it's more freedom. I don't want halfway freedom.
Because you don't know what would have happened if you didn't.
Sure we do. The people that didn't have the government chose to do it because they actually lived in a life that was nasty, brutish, and short. You're making it sound as if we didn't have no government. We had no government at some point.
We had a government. The people that lived at a time with no government chose to form government. That is the clearest proof of all that they must have thought government brought some kind of benefit. There was always government, and I think that is a red herring. There's always been monarchies. There's always been despots. There has always been some centralized form of government that has always run over the people. And time again, you look at the charter, the Charter of 1100 back in the UK. You look at the Magna Carta. You look at the Petition of Right. You look at the Grand Remonstrance. You look at all these things that led up to people leaving the UK to come to the United States, form the Declaration of Independence.
And what did they do? They formed a government.
Not originally, they didn't.
Sure. Well, they formed the Articles of Confederation, right? And they thought it was too weak.
No.
Absolutely.
No.
Then why did they form the Constitution?
Some people, designing men, if you read the Anti-Federalists, these guys called it the aristocratic combination. The aristocratic combination who knew they could lobby and pay in and control the government came up with this entire elaborate program, and the Constitution wasn't going to be signed. Until they added the Bill of Rights, it was never going to be signed.
But
what they tell you is, it was too weak. The Articles of Confederation were too weak. It's perfect. Nothing got done.
And that's exactly it, because there are people that want stuff to get done.
The reason we're having so much contention is not because we're arguing what you guys are arguing now. It's because we started to see the differences between our opinions, and we established that we're not doing what the Constitution says.
Well, you say that.
At least not in a strict fashion. No, you said that Shane was too strict. So at least you can acknowledge that he's a strict constitutionalist. And then we started talking about things that are, I mean, from my perspective, way off the reservation, but things where we have concrete evidence that the free market does it better.
Okay, what concrete evidence do you have that the free market does it better?
UPS.
Uber.
Okay,
Uber, the government has tried to stop. So something that has prevented deaths, which the government says is trying to keep us safe. Something that has prevented.
But wait, let's go back to FedEx, right? FedEx couldn't exist without a federal highway system in the FAA.
How not?
So you don't think that a free
because
market?
How do they ship all their stuff via highway?
Are you telling me there's no private roads ever? Because I actually live in a community that is a network of amazing private roads.
So you only want roads to be available to people with money.
So there's nothing in this world right now in America, because we're talking about America, that is available to people for free. You can literally go to MIT for free.
I could be completely broke, have no money at all, as long as I can afford gasoline, I can drive on the road.
And guess what? You can also walk.
Yeah.
You are free to travel.
Okay, I'm free to travel on roads. I can't walk across somebody's private property.
I'm going to make my my big exit here, but Blake, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm sorry. Sorry it was so contentious. I hope.
Oh no, I want to continue this. Right, I'm on a mission. I think there's a path between anarchy and even minarchy. Right. We need a federal government, and no libertarian is going to be elected president as long as the answer is we need to get rid of the highway system of the FAA.
My only advice is, arguing for minarchy, you can make a lot of cases. At the very least, we can have a lot of thinking, and more thinking is good.
Here's the beautiful
thing. But I wouldn't start with the FDA as being the most intrinsically needed thing in government.
Blake, and here's the beautiful thing about all this is that the market will decide.
Well, the market has decided we need a federal government, right?
We're gonna cut this one. Blake, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for sitting down and answer all the hard questions, man.
We didn't even have a chance to talk about coercion. I want to talk about coercion.
I think you made the case for it, but we'll come back on when Banks is done with this panel. Well, ladies and gents, we really appreciate you guys listening. I hope you really enjoyed this episode with the great Jacob Hornberger and Blake Ashby. We obviously some different thoughts out there. I just got home. It is, I don't know, 10, 20, got to spend a little bit of time with the wife and kids. I am out to the SHOT Show today, so if you're around, give me a shout. Let me know if you're out, and maybe we can meet up out here. But it was a fantastic, just an absolute wonderful Libertarian conference down here in Georgia. Hats off to Ryan Graham, Lori, his wife, and Stephanie. You guys put on one heck of a conference, and it just felt good. It felt like a great place to be. We've obviously got some news on a Senate run, so stay tuned. You guys might be seeing some things here in the very near future, and I'm really, really excited about it. But in the meantime, we could definitely use your reviews. If you got a 5-star in you, go out there, leave some comments. We'll read them here on The Rebellion. We really, really appreciate that kind of stuff. Like and subscribe to everything. We're obviously on all social media. You can find me in Banks and The Rebellion, obviously the pages, but F Banks Y is on Twitter, and I am at Shane T. Hazel. Keep up with us. Tweet at us. Let us know what's going on, what you're thinking. And we are really looking forward to this 2020 season and really shaking things up a bit. But like we always say, this is The Rebellion, your place for peace, liberty, free markets. We love you. We need you. Peace.
Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff.